Hello all, and welcome to the All In for Kansas Kids biweekly webinar for Wednesday, July 27th, 2022. And I don't know about you, but I've already had a very exciting Wednesday. So very curious to see what this hour is going to add to my day as far as excitement. We're going to go through our typical cadence today with our presentation. We'll start with some general updates, things that are happening in the system, professional development opportunities, etc. And then I'm going to be presenting a PowerPoint that was shared with me from the National Workforce Registry Alliance, which is the largest conglomeration, the only conglomeration of early childhood workforce registries. And so it's really representative of our workforce, and the data that they collect is really groundbreaking. So I'm excited to share some of that with you today. And I'm so thankful for Lindsay Orion for saving me today and providing some TA. So big shout out to her. So if you aren't aware, we're back in an open period for the sustainability grants, the third round of sustainability grants. And again, this is being sponsored by the Kansas Department for Children and Families, as well as Child Care Aware of Kansas. And if you know anybody that's been involved in this endeavor, sustainability grants, as well as the workforce appreciation bonuses, just give them a big thank you, because they've been working around the clock trying to get both of these things off the ground or to sustain previous efforts. And again, for the sustainability grants, these are non-competitive. So there's an allocation made for our workforce. And so you don't have to jump through a lot of hoops to get one. So if you've not checked this out yet and you're interested in getting one of those sustainability grants through DCF and Child Care Aware, I would direct you to the Child Care Aware of Kansas website, which we'll have a link in the chat. And you can look at the information for that grant opportunity, as well as the workforce appreciation bonuses, which we're going to go over here in a second. Another really cool resource that we located and was also talked about in the All In for Kansas Kids weekly email is Higher Paths, which is it's kind of a one-stop shop for parents or guardians that want to assist their child in finding something to be excited about, as far as maybe a future career path or a way to learn more about what they want to do when they get older. So I would encourage you to check out the link that's going to be put in the chat. And then if you are a parent or a guardian, or maybe you just know somebody that's kind of at that stage where they're trying to figure out what's going to pique their interest as far as workforce, go play around, because there's a lot of really neat engagement tools on this website. They also have all of their social media presences that are listed here and very user-friendly. Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. So if you've been kind of at our weekly or our bi-weekly webinars, or attended the children's cabinet meetings, as of July 1st, the Kansas Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund began matching dollar for dollar investments towards Dolly Parton's Imagination Library programs across the state. So this is really exciting. It's part of some other actions that were raised to the full cabinet at one of our last meetings. And so two of the other pieces that are in the works as far as Dolly Parton's Imagination Library is creating an advisory committee and establishing a nonprofit, so that we as a state can do more private partnerships and public-private partnerships in order to support the program as a whole as the state affiliate, and to support literacy efforts for our youngest Kansans. So if you have not been on the Dolly Parton Imagination Library website and you want to find out if you're in a covered area, either to enroll yourself or somebody that you that is eligible, there's a very, very neat interactive tool on the website. And then if you're interested in starting a program and becoming an affiliate at some level, you can email Pam Hunsaker at the email provided to do that. So between either emailing Pam or using the interactive map on Dolly Parton's website, you can figure out if there is an established program in your area and get signed up if you or somebody that you care about is eligible. Another podcast, and actually, as I was reviewing this morning, in a conversation about apprenticeships yesterday, this ESEPS was brought up. So early care and education pathway success. It's a new framework for apprenticeships that is really pretty groundbreaking and interesting, and has been proven pretty successful for early childhood workforce endeavors. But specifically this podcast, if you're a podcast person, I would recommend that you check this out, because the work that they're doing at ESEPS is really exciting for our workforce, especially when it comes to apprenticeships and creating that pipeline. We also have the opportunity for a town hall participation in either in person in Pittsburgh, and this is going to be Wednesday, August 3rd from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m., or virtually statewide, August 24th from noon to 1. And so this is an engagement opportunity hosted by United We. And it's just an opportunity to encourage conversations around advancing women in economic and civil leadership. So really great conversation to be a part of. If you're able to attend, you will also receive a $10 gift card for your time. So check out the links in the chat if you're interested. Again, there's an in-person opportunity in Pittsburgh, Kansas, and then there's also a virtual event for statewide participants. And I kind of touched on this a second ago, but we're going to go back over it. So we had a presentation last webinar from Child Care Aware of Kansas, kind of giving us the nitty gritty about the workforce appreciation bonuses, how they're going to be broken down, the eligibility requirements, the amount of the workforce appreciation bonuses, and then a little bit of information about how they're going to be administered in kind of a scaled approach. So based on the setting that you work. So a couple key takeaways. If you've not been on the Child Care Aware of Kansas website to learn about these bonuses yet, I really encourage you to do so. Everything that you need is on that website. There's recordings of previous webinars that they hosted. There's a great FAQ sheet. And then there's all of the information that was presented to us about if you're a child care provider or if you're eligible, when you'll be notified, how much you could receive, and when that window will be. There's also things that you need to do to update your information possibly. So I encourage you to please go check out the Child Care Aware of Kansas website and navigate to the workforce appreciation bonuses so that we don't miss anybody. There's so much work that's been going into making sure that our providers receive this bonus. So please remember to check that out. We also want to highlight for you professional development opportunities that are coming up. Kansas Children's Service League always does such a fantastic job of keeping a really, longitudinal index of training opportunities. So if you need to kind of plan out your professional development for the year, that's always a great place to go, KCSL, the website. But just a few things that are coming up in case you need some childcare licensing hours, or if you're just, have some questions that you need answered and you want to broaden your scope. Okay, and so now I'm going to dive right into our presentation, which is all about the way that the National Workforce Registry Alliance has used early childhood data, so workforce data from participating registries to inform conversations at the national level. But before we get into that, and I just want to say this is not my presentation. They were kind enough to lend it to me, so I did not create this. It's very pretty, but it is not my work. But before I get into this, so the state of Kansas, we are members of the Alliance. We participate. I actually went to a conference in May. It was a leadership symposium talking about kind of the direction of the Alliance and how we can continue to collaborate. So Kansas has been participating in the Alliance for a number of years. We've had, when I started this work on PDG, there were representatives from DCF, from Casito, from higher education that were regularly attending these meetings. They were informing conversations about registries. They were learning and collaborating. And so this is not work that I'm responsible for. There's been so many people who have established this relationship with the Alliance and really set Kansas up for success as far as the development of a registry. So we do participate in these conversations, but because we don't have a registry, our membership is kind of limited. So just to be clear, none of the data that we're going to look at today will be informed by Kansas because we don't have a registry. So that's future state, but just to be very clear, this is not our data. This is just what's taking place in the nation. So the Alliance itself, so the National Workforce Registry Alliance, is a professional organization that is the only representation we have for early childhood workforce registries. And it's a bunch of people that come together, almost exclusively volunteer their time. There's a few paid positions, but almost exclusively volunteer their time to create resources for states that are coming after, to facilitate collaborative relationships with leaders in the market, with other subject matter experts that know about how to interpret data. They host roundtables with, guest presenters from the CDA Council. They really are a fantastic connector for professional resources for those of us who are working with workforce data or trying to establish a registry. This is a really fantastic visual that the Alliance created. And I think it really shows how, even though state infrastructures vary, we know that state infrastructures vary. So when you talk about the way that a registry is comprised, as far as licensing, QRIS, and all of the other components that go into what a registry could be, every state is different. But for the most part, I think that this visual really shows the key components that most states are trying to get in one place in order to aggregate data. And that's really the purpose of the Alliance, and one of the best benefits from a workforce registry is being able to have that data. So we're pretty similar. State of Kansas is pretty similar. Having the QRIS, which is the program recognition, as well as licensing, as well as data, and then the CCR&Rs, our resource and referral agencies. Those were the primary, as well as professional development, so that learning management. But we have the same needs. These are the needs that we articulated when we wrote our RFP for the registry, and we're in the dream state with all of you for the last few years. So as far as how we compare to other states, we have a lot of the same needs, and the framework looks very similar. And then the functions are all pretty much the same, right? So when we talk about the importance of having collaboration between drivers in our workforce, like our CCR&Rs, our QRIS, our licensing, etc., it's so that we can perform the functions that are listed in the Venn diagram that's in front of us. So I think this is a really fantastic visual, and it shows, for the most part, the key components that most states are trying to integrate when we talk about workforce data. And a little bit about professional registries in general. So they've been around for a long time. Specific to early childhood, I believe the oldest registry is Wisconsin. And they actually ended up helping a few of the states around them to develop their own registries, and have really become this subject matter expert in how to write RFPs, meet the needs of your workforce, etc. But so I think the oldest is Wisconsin. And then since then, we believe that about 45 registries are on board. Now, some of those are regional registries. Like, we're going to look at data here in a few slides from a regional registry in Miami-Dade. It is not a statewide registry. It is not the Florida statewide registry. It's a regional registry, but those are pretty few and far between. So total, they exist in 45 plus states, in addition to a few outlying regions, like we just talked about. So they have some common functions, the QRIS, the licensing, the professional development, etc. For the most part, members of the Alliance and people who contributed to these data sets that we're going to look at have, for the most part, the same functions. And then, so the current scope of reach for the Alliance and their data set is about 1 million members of the workforce, which they estimate to be 2/3. And that's after they aggregated the data, went through and cleaned it and verified. So the 1 million members of the workforce that we are able to reach through the Alliance is all verified data through an early childhood workforce registry. And that's why it's so pivotal that we have these registries, is to be able to have informed conversations that are verified, and that we know the information is reliable and that we can replicate it. And the Alliance really likes to think of themselves as an emergency broadcast system for early childhood. And one of the ways that they fulfill that role is during the pandemic. There was a study that was done by Yale, and it looked into a variety of kind of ecological and health factors within childcare environments. And if you go to the Alliance's website, you can look at that full report. But because of the data that the Registry Alliance has, they were able to inform that national policy conversation. So a little bit more about what registries do and then what the Alliance does. So registries, we know that they provide infrastructure for engagement and support for our workforce. We also know that it strengthens the professional development system by having approved training opportunities, to have training opportunities that are automatically put into that person's portfolio. There's just a lot of benefits specific to the professional development system that have been streamlined very efficiently by registries. Registries also support childcare licensing just by the amount of information that they collect and the way that they can interface with those other entities. And I won't read all of them, but then the Alliance itself as a resource is absolutely fantastic. So our team, and as I said, we staff members from DCF, from Casito, from other agencies have learned so much from being part of the Alliance. When I needed, guidance on RFPs or trying to kind of do the front loading work of what do we need to know about a registry, members of the Alliance were so willing to send us documents and let us review where they've been. So as a resource, it is absolutely fantastic for us as a state to be part of this, because we get so much help. And so it's made our registry process a lot easier. So based on the registries, the early childhood registries that are members of the Alliance, these are common registry functions as of a survey that was done in 2020. And I will say that I believe all of these things were features that we heard from you all, from shareholders, were very important for our registry to do. So a few of them are trainer approval, attendance verification, statewide job boards, resume building tools. So just these are the functions that based on Alliance membership, so the various 45 registries that exist in our nation, these are some of the commonalities. So it's pretty encouraging for me to see this, at least knowing that a lot of the things that are important to our shareholders, not only did we ask for, but we're pretty much in line with what other people think is valuable across the nation. So, so here are a few things that are really, really important about registries. And I think most of all, one of the things that registries do that's so helpful, not only for the system, but for the provider themselves, is that connection to professional development opportunities, being able to inventory previous learning experiences and then future state learning experiences, as well as connecting to additional resources within the infrastructure, like coaches, mentors, trainers. But on a more global scale, being able to contribute data to this huge system really helps the bidirectional information system. So being able to collaborate with entities like Yale and contribute to national conversations about, ecology and health and safety and environments real time as a pandemic is happening is really profound, I think. And then it gives us a bigger, from an equity lens, it gives us a much larger perspective outside of just what we know. And to articulate this, so one of the problems that we run into in systems work pretty frequently is that we survey, or it feels like we survey the same people over and over. Since most of the ways that we are able to collect data is from self-reporting, we typically interface with the same people, and we could get a disproportionate view about something. And so registries help us get away from that, because they should be polling the vast majority of the workforce, and they should be pulling very clean data that's been verified. So even outside of a state scale, on a national scale, being able to aggregate that larger information is really, really powerful. And again, so I mean, just personally from my own role, this is the Alliance. We are members. The benefits just to myself have been incredible because I feel like I have so many resources when I need help or I need direction. But again, the communities of practice that the Alliance supports, they have a community of practice for QRIS staff. I mean, they really support a lot of the conversations that we in systems work are having anyway, and they make sure that they get the people that need to be in the conversation at the table. But another thing that the Alliance has done that's really unique to our field is establish a set of quality standards, and we're going to go over those in just a second. But as far as I know, it was the first decisive effort to say, at the bare minimum, we're going to need these data standards if we are going to aggregate data across states, across registries, and look at it from a national stance. So they established these quality standards and then data rules so that we could participate in conversations like the one we had with Yale and be able to provide really comprehensive reports. And so this is some of the information that the next few slides is kind of some macro level stuff. And then we're going to get into some specific education data points that the Alliance was able to pull from, I believe it was their 2022 report. It's on the slide, so I'll be able to verify. But so we, Kansas, there we are in kind of a pink purple, we are actively building. But then all of these blue states are states that have registries that collect data about early childhood professionals. And I believe almost all of these are also members of the Alliance. And so in some way or another, being an Alliance member that we are, in some way or another, we have some access to some of this data, depending on the amount that the other state participates. So it's really pretty cool. Just being able to interface with people who are going through the exact same process and have so much more knowledge than we do sometimes. And so this is kind of the process. I talked a little bit earlier about how the data standards were developed and why that's so important. So in order to become eligible to participate in these nationwide data polls that the Alliance conducts, a state has to actually submit for eligibility. So there's an inventory that's conducted of the rules or the way that data and information are handled within the registry, and then modifications are made so that each registry is conforming to the same data rules, and when it's submitted, it's clean and it's easy to use. And so at this point in time, and this is just another graphic showing kind of where other states are at with their partnership eligibility review, which is being eligible for that participation. So as you can see, it's a pretty small group. I think it's 17 that actually contribute to these huge comprehensive data polls. And just another slide that shows it kind of in a different way. So one of the things that we discussed at the leadership symposium back in May was kind of goals of the Alliance and where we want to go as members, and how we can use our registries to better inform national conversations. And so these are just some of the projections that the Alliance was able to come up with, just based on annual reports, based on what we've been able to do, what they've been able to do in the past. But they anticipate that by next year, we should have, 50% of provider data in the workforces that are, part of this process. So 50% of registries should be contributing data at that time, which is a huge number. That's a huge number of providers and workforce representatives to get in one place. And then So another thing that, and there should be a link in the chat, directing you to the Alliance's website. You can look at all of this, but one of the things that each state has to do and go through is kind of provide an overview of the user profiles that their registry allows. So if you want to learn more about each state's registry and how they may vary, you can go to the Alliance's website. You can look at each of the state profiles, but for the most part, these are the way that user roles are defined within registries. This is the way that the user is kind of broken down and the data is collected. And a lot of these, if not all, are reticent of the way that we classify our workforce, some variants, of course. Another thing that we need to consider when we talk about the data that's collected by the Alliance, and quite frankly, some of the most real-time data that we have about our workforce, is that it is impacted by requirements for participation by each state. So as you can see here, it says that only 29 states require some portion of providers to register. And so that may be that a state only requires subsidy eligible providers to register for to use the registry, or another state may require all licensed providers to use the registry. And so that impacts not only the amount of data, but where it's coming from. And so it's important that I do say, the information is only good as participation. You can see here that 18 states do require participation in their registry for childcare licensing. So I would assume that those are states that use probably an API to interface with their licensing capabilities. But that, it's 18 states and not all. Everybody has their own reasons for the way that they collect their information. And so we know that there's a lot of information that's found in registries, but these are some of the most important ones, some of the most powerful ones when it comes to informing these national conversations that we all want to be a part of. First and foremost, from an equity lens, the demographic information that's collected from registries, if that's, race, gender, location, salary, things like that, things that really, things that really inform or could inform somebody's quality of life. We know that we have a lot of gaps about what our providers look like, who they are, what their life looks like. And so having this demographic information would be incredibly helpful to inform those conversations and to meet providers' needs. We also know that without valid employment and wage information, it's very difficult to make, to advocate for, raises in wages or to talk about benefits, because we just don't know. We don't have great information about employment and wages, especially at the statewide level. And then education and training. So one of the things that the Alliance has done that's really important is they've maintained a conversation with NACI pretty consistently to try and use the data that's collected from partnership eligibility review eligible states. So those states that have the highest rigor of data rules, they've tried to use that information in conversations with NACI to talk about power of the profession and kind of where the workforce is landing as far as the education that they've achieved compared to some of the framework of power to the profession. It's a really interesting conversation. And if you're interested in that, I would recommend that you go to the Alliance's website because they have the full report and how the levels line up. Credentialing. So registries are also incredibly helpful for stackable and portable credentials, which we know is really, really important if we want to always recognize the hard work that our providers put in and not penalize them for, let's say, moving outside the state or, having a life change, which we all know happens. So just to make things seamless and transferable, being able to have those credentials in a registry is really important. And then you can see here, I don't want to belabor this point, but you can see here there's a lot of other great data points that are found in registries that's important. And And the other way that credentials especially can inform conversations is by getting a good baseline of where investments need to be made in the system. So as you all know, Casito was able to provide a great number of CDA scholarships through some relief funding, which is fantastic. And I am very excited for in the future when we have registries and we can project how many people need those scholarships based on data, because we'll have a better understanding. And this is so true. So the Alliance is just, I've been very impressed as far as just a great partnership and a great collaboration tool. When I went to the symposium in May, they had representation from licensing, from regulation at the national level. They had representation from Head Start affiliates, from the CDA Council, just really removing a lot of the barriers that those of us who are at the systems level often interface with and can't get past a certain point. And so it's been really great to kind of benefit from partnering with the Alliance. And then here's kind of a more expansive list of partners. You can see here that Johns Hopkins is listed. They host really fantastic communities of practice that I found to be very helpful. A lot of institutions of higher ed, a lot of people who are doing research and trying to use information to advance conversations about equity and advocacy. And so this is the 2022 workforce report. And I was very selective about which slides I included here, because I do not want to misrepresent anything. And it gets pretty granular, where it's broken down a little bit more. But in totality, the workforce report for 2022, based off of the respondents, right? So we have to keep that in mind, that this is only 14 of 17 eligible states that have that high level of data confidence, if you will, out of the about 45 states that have registries. So we're talking 14 states that contributed to this, but I think this is pretty incredible to see it laid out like this. And the full report goes pretty far in length, and it really breaks down some of the other nuances that we find as far as education level by role, by setting, by experience, etc. So, but we know that we have to be careful when we look at big data like this, especially if we can't tease out some of the nuances. So, and then, as I was saying before, this is a constant conversation that the Alliance has been participating in, is really collaborating with NACCE and the framework for the power to the profession, and using some of the data that's been cleaned and aggregated from the almost decade of data polls that have been done under the Alliance to continue to inform those conversations. And one of the big conversations that we had at the May symposium was, what kind of resources are we really looking at in order to meet some of these recommendations? So what do we need to do to reinforce our infrastructure to provide coaching and mentoring and TA and PD specialists and all of these things that people need in order to achieve. So, but it's been really nice to be able to have not only the data, the hard data, but to be able to speak with the experts at the same time. And I absolutely love this visual. I think this is probably one of the best visuals I've seen so far. And again, I did not put this together, absolutely not. But really showing how all of this works together. And I'm sure that there's a few entities that are left out that would be Kansas centric. This is the national visual that kind of represents most of the entities that most state registries interface with. And then if you look at kind of those smaller gears very close to the registry, those are kind of the primary functions, which is very reticent of what we value and what we expect and articulated for our registry as well. So we've got learning management, professional development, core competencies, and a career pathway. I mean, all of the things that we know are really important. And so just from a general, if you're interested in what the Alliance does and you want to learn more, this is really specific to you. But I'm excited to continue participating with the National Workforce Registry Alliance. I know that there's other people within our system that are regular attendees of either communities of practice or, whatever professional resource. But future states, so by 2025, the Alliance would like to have registries in all 50 states. We know that the number is about 45 right now. But just having that saturation would greatly increase our ability to have data to inform these conversations, among other things. And then they estimate that the aggregated data will represent about 1 million people from our workforce, which is really incredible. And then also to be able to participate in direct payments and some of the supportive resources as kind of a foundational function of registries. And then here are some of the things that that the Alliance believes is getting in the way of being able to, collaborate fully. But these are some of the same issues that we deal with just as at the systems level. So these are very, we know these problems, right? We know that there's problems with alignment. We know that it's difficult sometimes to get representation from everybody in the workforce. We talked about that, kind of that self-identifying survey opportunity and how that can kind of change the way that the information looks. And then just the fact that many of these issues, so building registries, maintaining information, reaching people, a lot of those things are access and equity issues to begin with. So, but these are some of the things that they see as barriers, and definitely these are barriers that we deal with every single day in our system as well, funding, etc. So that is all I have. But we definitely have time for a few questions if anybody has any questions about the Alliance and kind of the way that they use this information, and hopefully how we can participate in these conversations once our registry is ready to go. Okay, so if you can see the chat, I apologize, but I cannot do two things at once. So as far as right now, I don't have an answer, Rich, about whether or not the registry will require participation for licensed providers. I know that there's a lot of nuances that have to be kind of fleshed out yet, as far as license exempt, what types of professional development are going to be accepted. So I don't have an answer to that yet. I'm sorry. Okay, and so I don't see anything else. Let me pull this up one more time. This is just the tip of the iceberg. So if you really enjoyed this information and just how registries work and how incredible they can be, I really think that you would enjoy going to the Alliance's website, looking at the maps, looking at all of the reports. There's annual data polls, I think for the last 5 years. You can just pull up and you can read through everything. And it's incredibly informative. There's also white papers there. There's the Yale study, but go check it out if you want to kind of see maybe what we can do in the next few years and participate in collaboratively with our partners who also have registries. Go check out their website. So just a few things to remind you of. So our next early childhood recommendations panel. Oh, I'm sorry, Rich, go ahead.
Yeah, do you know if the registries that you've seen have like a query where you could look at a particular labor market or a particular regional child care market within a state to see, to kind of do a query like that? For example, you might say within the child care labor market of, let's say, Manhattan or Lawrence or Wichita, you could do a query and find out a profile at that level with the registries.
I don't think so. You're saying using the Alliance's resources?
Well, I, I guess I was just sort of wondering, of the registries that are out there in states, do they have query capabilities to
Mm,
do studies of childcare workforce uh, in a regional labor market? Like
I
you
got you. I
typically don't,
understand.
as a childcare provider, you typically don't commute 2 hours to your job. It's within a very specific geographic area. If you can do a study to see within that region, what does our childcare workforce look like? Does it have that capability? Is what I'm asking.
I understand. So I will say, this is going to be a lengthy answer. So I will say that if you go to the Alliance's website and you look at the member profiles, you can see every single state in one place that has a registry. Now, what front-facing capabilities each registry has is completely contingent on that state. Some do have front-facing resource tools for the public, most don't. I will say that most registry websites that I have been on, you really can't get very far if you are not a member. If you don't have some sort of ID, you get a pretty front page, but you don't really get too far beyond that. Some do. I will say that I have not, to switch gears, so back to the actual data that the Alliance pulls from those participating registries, I have never seen a data point like that. If you were to find it, I think that you would find it in the annual reports. It may break the information down like that, but no, there is not a current functioning tool that will do that. It would have to be done the old school way through the actual report.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think for the most part, the information as far as demographics and really trying to break things down, a lot of it is focused on educational attainment. So looking at, what kinds of providers have CDAs, have associates, have bachelor's degrees, how long have they been in the field, what is their pay, and then kind of looking at all of those factors. Those have been the primary demographic factors in the information that I've seen. Okay, so we have the Early Childhood Recommendations Panel meeting, which is going to be August 19th. Again, always the third Friday of the month. It'll be from 9 to 11:30 a.m. If there's any open forum comments, you're more than welcome to go ahead and email those to me, please, before the Thursday prior at 5 o'clock. I will need those. We're going to have another biweekly webinar August 10th, which is 2 weeks from today, also on a Wednesday, and it'll be from 12 to 1. If you have something that you would like to bring to the webinar, something that you would like answered, you can always get in touch with me and we'll find space on the calendar, not a problem. And then finally, we do have our children's cabinet and then the early childhood group meeting on August 5th, which is next Friday. So the full Kansas Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund meeting is in the morning. Help me out, Lindsay, 9 to 11:30?
9 to noon.
9 to noon. And then the main event, just kidding, the early childhood group meeting starts at 1:30, goes till 3. So that's usually a little bit less formal. It'll actually be an expansion on parts of the conversation today. So thank you so much for being here with us, and reach out if there's anything that we can help you with until we see you again.